Do you want to tell me, what do you think is the biggest benefit of today's webinar for you?
I think probably just getting that perspective out there. So for like me and my brother, having foster kids who they're not a direct like relation,
Yeah,
and they might come in halfway through my life as someone who's lived their own life for 9-10 years or longer or less.
okay.
So getting that perspective out there,
I think it is really such a good platform for us as siblings that have lived with those with FASD who have a voice. So it's nice for us to be able to actually have those conversations. And actually, when I was answering some of the questions in preparation for today, it was quite like therapy.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Upon reflection, it was thinking, oh, I didn't even know I felt like that, but actually,
yeah,
people probably do. So yeah, I think just to have a platform, to have a voice, and actually know that the audience that are listening want to understand what we're saying.
Can I just say, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, as always, for our monthly webinar, FASD Awareness. Now, today, this is a subject that I felt was really important to bring to the wider public. And I wanted to ask the question, have you considered, or do you appreciate the role of siblings when someone new enters a family? Siblings can frequently be overlooked as part of the family unit, and their relationships and roles require really detailed consideration. Their needs and voices should always be heard. And today we've got a real cross spectrum of guests that are adults that have been siblings throughout their childhood. So they've got a huge experience and understanding. And I'd love to welcome everybody. We've got Bridie, we've got Oscar, and we've got Cleo. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start, if I may, with Bridie. So Bridie, lovely to have you join us. Thank you so much. Can you give us a bit of an insight into, first of all, what your experience of being a sibling has been?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. So my mum and dad, like my parents, and me and my two other siblings, birth siblings, I must have been probably about 12 or 13 when they decided to foster. And we had two children come to stay with us for respite every now and again, not really understanding what their needs are, but loved having them. It was fun. It was just like a bigger family for the weekend. And obviously when they came, we were all really excited and looking forward to seeing them. And they were younger than all of us as well. So we did sort of have a bit of pecking order anyway, me being the eldest. So it was quite cute that they were there and they were young. But then eventually they did move in with us and were with us on long-term foster placement. And they stayed with us until they were 18. And there were obviously lots of, I don't know how much sort of into detail you want me to go, but there was a lot of ups and downs along the way. I was obviously the oldest out of my siblings, so I feel like I do have a really good understanding as a teenager, really, as going into my teens as well, rather than my younger siblings, because they were probably old enough to really understand really what was going on, even though I didn't really understand what was going on either.
Yeah.
But obviously trying to navigate that with hormones, secondary school, GCSE, and the reason why my parents actually decided to foster is because my mum was working a lot of night shifts. My dad was doing lots of different shifts and obviously shattered as well. And she wanted to be there for us more in terms of like meetings at the schools and just to be around in the evenings. I would come home from school and I would be there with my younger two siblings quite a lot, and sort of being a second mum really. I was like a young carer to my own birth siblings before we even fostered. And when we started to foster, the other two siblings that came along, I did end up obviously taking on a lot more responsibility, which is something that I thought I wasn't doing. I thought I was going to stop having a responsibility because mum and dad were around more. So, yeah, I think there was.
You really went through quite a journey. I think it's really interesting because you already had an established family network. And then when the foster children came into your environment, it really changed that environment. We're going to come back to you, if I may, because I think that's a really important point there, is that you already had an established placement in place. Oscar, you were quite different, weren't you? Can you explain your situation?
Yeah, so my parents actually started fostering before they had any birth children. So they had, I believe, one long-term placement, and then my mum gave birth to me. And then we had another long-term placement after that and did respite. And then my younger brother came along. So over the years, we've had a variety of different children come through as either respite or as long-term placements. We've done a variety of needs as well. And my brother and I have both grown up with all of this in our life. We didn't really, I suppose we had a short period where we stopped fostering for a little bit. I think we stopped respite and only had one long-term placement for a short while, which in our eyes was stopping. And then.
And how did that feel at that time?
Well, I remember my brother and I both said that it felt really almost quite uncomfortable because we were used to it. It was, I think my brother said it's what we do. So quite an interesting way to grow up, to be honest, but I think it was really beneficial for us as people.
That's interesting because, again, we'll come on to that one. So, you know, your situation was, again, in fostering. You've grown up as a child who fosters throughout your entire childhood. So, again, another perspective there. And I understand as well, you've not just been foster carer, you've also covered SGO, special guardianship orders, because one of your children.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll come on to that in a second as well, because I think that's another important, just another dimension within the fostering environment. Now, we're going to introduce now Cleo. Lovely to have you join us, Cleo. Thank you so much. Now, you come from quite a different background, don't you? Can you tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, so like my brother was adopted just like me, but he was like adopted first, and I'm like the younger sibling. So I didn't grow up with like fostering or anything. I just like came into it with that was just like my brother. That's just how I grew up. So yeah, it's just something I grew up with. It's not something that was kind of I kind of met or came to me. It was just something I grew up with. So it's really different for me than the other two by the sound of it.
And but at the same time, I guess, you know, with Oscar's also grown up in an environment and just have different children coming in and out through the situation. And I think with that, one of the interesting things I think has been that you've lived with somebody with FASD your entire life as the younger sibling. And I think this is one of the really interesting points, because we have an awful lot of adoptive families where they will adopt one child and then they'll adopt another child. And then maybe the diagnosis comes in maybe when they're 6 or 8 for FASD. Can you tell us about what it's felt like for you, Cleo, really living alongside somebody, an older sibling with FASD?
Well, for me, I mean, like it's the same as growing up with any sibling. Like you always have your arguments and stuff. So I won't say like arguments have been extreme or anything because I feel like anyone with a sibling goes through the same thing. But what I would say I found hard is like kind of knowing that my brother is a bit different to everyone else's sibling. I mean, when I was younger, I found it really hard. Like my friends would be really close to their sibling, or would do so many like cool things with their sibling, and they'd be like friends. But I could never. I suppose at the time when I was younger, I could never really call my brother like my friend because we were so different and we handled things so different. And sometimes how he handled things or stuff he said got to me more than, stuff like my friend's siblings would say to them. I was constantly comparing, like, oh, this is my sibling, but my friend's sister does this. Like, I was constantly comparing it, I suppose, when I was growing up. And no, I remember it did used to affect me a bit. It did used to kind of annoy me that me and my brother were perhaps not as close as like my friends and their siblings. Which looking back is such like a petty thing, but like at the time when I was younger and going through school and stuff, that was like a big thing that I kind of cared about.
Well, you mentioned there that it was quite, you felt now that it was kind of a petty thing, but actually when you're growing up, these are big deals. You know, Bridie, you said that you were a 13-year-old and you've got all these new members of the family coming in. Did you feel like they were new members of the family to you, or did you feel that you already had your siblings and
Yeah.
you had to adapt to other people coming in? How did that feel for you?
Um, Obviously, I do want to start by saying there were lots of benefits to doing it because I don't want to come across really negative about the things I'm saying, but I am also being really honest.
Absolutely. And I think it's imperative that you are. Yeah.
For our best interests and had a lot of quality time with us because of it, etc. We had a lot more opportunities. But I do feel that if I am being 100% honest, I did always feel separate. I did always feel like it was us and them, even though our parents did include us in everything that they could. There was that element of social workers, meetings, phone calls, all of these things that we didn't have. And we also weren't allowed to be part of it. And it was all like it was a secret, obviously, because we weren't allowed, as I'm older now, I understand why. But at that time, I'm thinking, why are they so special? Why do they get to have all these meetings? Why is everyone talking about them all the time? Why is, mum having time with one of my siblings going shopping for the day? And I don't even get to do that. But that was sort of allocated time that was agreed and, behind the scenes of sort of the plans, etc., and care plans and whatever that I obviously wasn't aware of. But it did feel like a bit of a stab in the back because it's like, well, I'm actually your daughter. And then it made me feel a bit like, well, why don't you want to spend time with me? But it was more that that was her job and that's what she needed to do. And she was obviously doing what she needed to do, which was great. And she did, and she has done a really good job at it. And Dad. But it didn't mean that it didn't sort of push our noses out of joint. And I think as the eldest sibling as well, I think even just as a sibling anyway, you compare what your mum and dad done with you, and when like my younger sister, you think, oh my God, she's allowed to go out at that age. I wasn't allowed to do that then, and whatever. And
Absolutely.
as the time goes on, in the end, there was 5 of us. So I'm thinking, by the time it got to the youngest one, which was obviously the foster sibling, they had so many extras anyway. And I'm thinking, what on earth is going on? How is this happening? But I think I did, like I said before, take on more responsibility as well because my mum and dad did take on a lot more responsibility and I don't think they probably even realised themselves. And we didn't have the diagnosis when they first came to us. So that was always behavioural issues and lots of meetings, lots of sort of advocating, supporting, fighting for what they needed and learning as we went along. And even now we're obviously still learning. But yeah, a lot of research and then trying to share that with us in a not a childish way because I was obviously more of a teenager, but my brother and sister But then I even felt like I was a bit of a sounding board as well for my birth brother and sister, because it was like, I know what mum and dad were like before the foster siblings came, and I know what they're like now. And they're,
Interesting.
yeah, I've always taken on the role of being like the eldest and the one that tells mum and dad what the problem is. So everybody would load the gun and I would shoot it. And because I was the eldest, then I would be the one that's having the arguments and wanting to move out and stay at my friend's house and whatever. But obviously, it was because I was being a sort of mentor or whatever you would call it to my younger siblings, because sometimes they felt like they obviously couldn't talk to my mum and dad about certain things, or they didn't understand. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even understand fully with a lot of it.
Well, of course,
To talk to.
of course, one of the challenges would probably be in your situation, they were new to fostering as well. And as a foster carer myself, I know that, boy, did I make some basic errors when we were first starting. And you think you can save everybody, but you absolutely can't. And yes, we're all, you know, we are fallible. We are going to make mistakes. And as adults, we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to be really pushed outside our comfort zone. So whilst we're feeling outside our comfort zone, I think it's really, it becomes very challenging for the parent as well to be able to consider and have to consider the child in all of that, you know, the birth children with all of that. But it is really crucial that one does. I'm really interested by this as well. You were talking about your sibling relationships. Oscar, did you feel that growing up in an environment, particularly when your brother was born, your birth brother, did you feel that there was, Bridie mentioned about almost being the elder relationship and actually having a responsibility, feeling that responsibility for her siblings, almost like a protective responsibility? Did you feel that with your brother?
Well, it depended on the foster child that we were looking after at the time, because a lot of the time, I feel that my brother, he can often be a bit more mature than I can in many ways. So he is, as he's grown up, he's much more aware of things. Early on, especially when a lot of the children were more his age than mine, I felt like there were a lot of times where I would have to talk to him, where I would have to discuss things with him and intervene at times. There were times when I'd want to protect him. There were times when I'd want to protect the child. There'd be times when it'd be just making sure everything's safe with both. It was never, even though he's my birth brother, it was never a favoritism. It was purely prioritizing who needed it at the time. So, for example, there'd be one situation where we were playing football in the garden with one child, and my brother loves being a football goalkeeper, and he loves going in goal. As the elder brother, I will always pelt it at him. But then when the foster child does it, who's a lot similar to my brother's age, there can then easily be brotherly fights breaking out where they're both this similar, almost, weight category, weight bracket. So they'll both be much more likely to have a little bicker, have a little, and I'll have to intervene and be like, hey, both of you, can you please not do this? We're all going to get told off.
So you became like the elder sibling, a bit like Bridie, but actually for the
mediator,
children as well, a mediator.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So being the elder has certainly got you have had to take on another level of responsibility within your family network. Cleo, as the younger sibling, I think this is a really interesting one. Did you feel, because FASD, the diagnosis, it dictates really in any family environment that that individual is going to take and demand so much more time and energy from your parents. Did you ever feel like that was something that was a problem for you, or was it something that you just grew up with and so you accepted? I'm really interested in this
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, when I hear about like favoritism, it took me back to this like moment I remember. So, I always did like normal schooling. I just did like, well, in where I live, it's like first school. I did middle school. I went on to secondary school, whatever. But my brother was a little bit different due to his like FASD needs. Once he got the diagnosis, he was taken out of school and he was homeschooled for a bit. And I remember when I'd go to school, I'd be so jealous because I'd be like, I've got to get up and I'm going to school. I'm getting up at 7, half 7, whatever. And I remember my brother could just stay in bed. It used to really annoy me. And I was like the older brother, he'd be like, oh, I can have a late night because I don't need to get up, whereas you do. It'd be like a little bit of a joke between us. So I remember thinking that was so unfair. I remember thinking, I used to think he was faking it. I just thought it was like absolutely a travesty of justice on me. That I had to get up and he didn't. I remember there was times when, because he was homeschooled, my mum would take him out sometimes, whether it just like simple stuff to get new shoes, maybe to the cinema. They'd do like support groups, whatever, and I'd be so annoyed that I had to go to school. And I don't even know if this is relevant. I just remember when I think of favoritism, I just think of this moment because I remember for this, however long it was, maybe like a year, I remember I was so annoyed that he got to like have fun with it. I felt like every day was a Saturday for him, and every day was like a Monday for me. Even though
Absolutely.
I was probably only year 7, year 8, I don't know, but that's
And
how I
when
felt at the time.
and when did you feel? Because do you know what, sibling rivalry is common in any family environment. Sometimes it can be amplified in a fostering or adoption environment. Sometimes it can be amplified just by the needs of those individuals. Every individual has another layer of needs, but sometimes it can be far more complex, can't it?
Yeah.
When did you realize that actually this was something that you were having to contend with, or that you would take on some of the responsibilities yourself to look after your brother? Did you ever do that?
I mean, I attempted to at times, but I'm not sure if I made the situation any better looking back on it. I'm sure my parents would agree. There would be times when my brother would get like at his peak, I always call it. It was at the time when I felt like he was to me at his worst. So I don't know if that's like if that even happens in FASD, but to me that's how it seemed. And he'd get kind of maybe like kind of aggressive in some of the what he'd say and what he'd do. And as the younger sister, sometimes I'd be a little bit scared, and I'd see it getting out of control in the house, and I'd try and like help the situation. I would try and be the mediator. I'd be like, please, like, calm down, like it's not good, I'd be going to my brother trying to help maybe, but to me it was helping, but to him it probably wasn't at all, and it probably wasn't very useful for my parents. But I used to think that I was kind of helping out by, I don't know, maybe trying to get him out of the room or trying to get him to come play in the garden or whatever, when in reality I probably just needed to leave the room myself. I'd do stuff like that. So I'd try and mediate, but
And that's interesting as well, because if I may, Bridie, at what point did you feel that you were able to communicate some of your concerns, some of your feelings, or worries with your parents?
So with the communication, I think I have been quite good in terms with my communication because I am quite literal and I am quite honest and open and a little bit anxious as well. So if I hold anything in, then I can't even look at you because I just can't. So
Yeah.
I just have to be really honest. So in a way, it probably did help because I have always told my mum and dad how I feel. And whether that was good or bad, I have always been open with them about what I think or what I shouldn't think. And most of the time, they obviously don't really want to hear what I think because it probably was nonsense or some of it at the time. And I think that has helped, but it has also, or did also, make me clash a lot with them because a lot of it was obviously out of their control, and a lot of it was through circumstance or behaviours and things like that that they're working on, and there's nothing they can really do, and it's their job. But it was a bit like, we'll sort it out, and it's like, well, I can't. I am, but it's not overnight.
Yeah.
And see, at first, we, like I said earlier, we didn't have the diagnosis of FASD, and me and my birth siblings, obviously, to be quite honest, had never really been open to or surrounded by anybody with any type of disability. We did in a way, because we went to primary schools that did have other children with disabilities, and we played with them sometimes, and they might invite us to the soft plays. It was like the best day ever. But we never really obviously knew somebody on a day-to-day basis and saw those behaviours, and our parents having to deal with those behaviours and thinking, why can he or she get away with that? You would ground me for a month if I'd done that, or whatever. But at the time, and obviously because there wasn't even a diagnosis for it, I was just thinking, these kids are just absolutely like crazy and feral and whatever. And what is going on? Why are my mum and dad just being really all right about it?
Yeah.
And it did feel quite like it was one rule for one and one rule for the other. And I think because obviously with FASD as we know it now, and I obviously understand a lot more now, you can't see it. It was that was the hardest part. I mean, obviously my foster siblings did have, and we have had lots of different foster placements throughout the time as well, with different disabilities like Williams syndrome and Down syndrome and lots of different things. But obviously our long-term placement is the FASD, and yeah, I just think it was a struggle, and it did feel very you're my birth kids, and this is the foster children, and a lot of time and effort obviously went into them, and it was a bit like, well, we know you're there, we know you're okay, we know you're getting on at school, we know you're fine, you're being fed and watered. It was a bit like, well, what more do you want? I don't know, I just want my mum and dad. But it, like, all of their time or any free time that they did have was obviously taken up with the FASD diagnosis and everything that went with it. But as you were saying with the communication, that was always an open sort of ended thing, as it still is now. But it's a hard one, I think. Because as well, obviously, starting the fostering, we were asked if we would like to go ahead, and obviously we had these children coming to us for respite, and it was all fun and games, and it was brilliant and whatever. But obviously, having those actually then moving in with us was a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, the honeymoon period had ended.
Soon ended quite quickly. I obviously then had to take on a lot more responsibility that I thought I was getting rid of.
Yeah.
And I felt quite disheartened, I think. And I did try and stay at Friends a lot more. And I just wanted to get out of the house, because I just felt like I did feel really misunderstood. I felt like, and I think obviously my siblings as well, felt like when we were voicing our opinions or how we were feeling and what, etc., we felt like it's a bit like, well, this is what we're doing. But then we would think, but that isn't what we were sold. We were sold that you're getting a new brother and sister, and we're going to have loads of fun times together. We're going to go on loads of holidays. I could be at all of your Christmas shows at school, and it's all going to be, you know, hunky-dory, and there isn't going to be any problems. And actually, we're going to have more quality time together, and you're not going to have to take on those roles as much. But it was more, and then it felt like the free time that they did have, they were then using on what they needed to help my foster.
And you know, you mentioned as well that during the course of that, of course, they're learning, they're developing as well. At what point did you feel there was a change? When did you learn to communicate, or did your parents actually learn to communicate more effectively with you about some of the things that they were doing and the reasons why they were doing it? Did that
Yeah.
conversation happen?
Yes, I think obviously as we got older, depending on the information that they could share, it was obviously shared with us in the relevant way and sort of broken down in a way that we could understand. But even with that, it was a bit like, oh, so I
Yeah.
don't care if they've got all that. Like, what? It still feels like you're choosing to do all of these other things with them over us. It always felt like a your last type thing, whether
Mm.
it's intentional or not, because I know that obviously all our needs were met and we were spoiled, but it was just that feeling of always feeling like you come home from school, social workers are there. How long are they going to be here for? You go out for a day shopping with your mum, finally, because you know you don't get that allocated time like the others. So let's have this time and have a day in Primark and go wild. And again, social worker calls, your mum's on the phone for 2 hours while you're in the shop. And it just felt like there were constant hurdles all the time. And in the end, I did feel a bit like, do you know what? I can't even be bothered to try and spend time with you anymore because I'm the one who's constantly getting upset because when we were then voicing it, it was a bit like, well, this is our job. Well, this is what we're doing now. You know, you've got to get on with it, basically. You're old enough to understand. And it was quite hard. I still,
Yeah.
I mean, I did move out when I was 17, but I was quite independent for my age. I got a full-time job at 16 when I left school, and I couldn't wait to leave. But I feel like I don't know whether I would have felt like that if I didn't feel the way I did towards everything that was going on in the household.
Yeah.
I'm not putting all of the blame on that because
No, exactly. And you know, this is the important thing, the honesty and the comments that you're saying. I see Oscar as well. You're nodding away there, looking on. Tell us a little bit about some of your situations like that, where maybe you'd built up a resentment against some of the foster children. And did the impact of the social worker and the lifestyle, do you feel it had a negative impact on your life at any point?
I think it's really hard to generalize it because in many ways it can be seen as a curse, but in other ways it's very much a blessing. So my brother and I were both really into our local football team and we want to go as much as we can. But we cannot talk about it at the dinner table with the kids because if one of them hears, he will constantly be going on about it. He'll want to go with us. He'll be pestering my parents to go with them. And you can't do anything like that. And I can't socialize with my brother, even though I'm now old enough to do what I want. I can drive us places. I can do anything like that. I can't talk about it freely because if they hear, it's then going to cause so much stress for my parents because it's just going to be that in their ear for the rest of the week until the game. And same thing with the other foster child, but with food. If I say, oh, you know what, can we have a pizza soon? If he hears that, he's going to be like the dog. His ears will prick up and he'll be like, oh, pizza, are we having pizza? When are we having pizza? And then he will constantly go on about pizza. So, I mean, those are some very childish examples of it, but I had to be careful what friends I brought around because I couldn't bring around friends who'd swear a lot or would be inappropriate because what if the kids heard? You cannot risk anything like that because these children are so what's the word, but like easily
Influence.
yes, easily influenced, that if they hear this one thing, even if it's an offhand comment from one of my rougher friends, it could still get them in trouble. And it
Yeah.
might mean nothing to one person, but that kid at his school, where there's other children who are very easily influenced, it could all blow up into this massive thing.
Yeah. Bridie, go on. You've got something to add to that.
sorry, yeah, just going off of the back of what you said, Oscar.
Yeah.
In terms of friends, I did feel as well that in a way I didn't even want to have friends around. really wanted
Definitely.
my house because it was a bit of a madhouse anyway, because there were so many of us that lived there. But because I obviously had like my roles and responsibilities as well, and my mum and dad obviously were quite strict, and I wasn't allowed to go out before I'd done certain chores and blah blah blah. And it was just like, do you know what? I'm just going to go to your house. Or,
Yeah.
I didn't want them to obviously come back as well and see those behaviours and be like, why is that? Why are they being so weird? Or why are they doing that?
Oh, definitely.
Like, and then I couldn't even really tell them why either. I'm like, oh, I don't know,
Mm.
you know, they're weird, like whatever, and try and sort of brush over it. But yeah, I think even going back to what Cleo said earlier as well, referring and comparing against my friends and their siblings, it was quite hard because obviously I didn't have the relationship with them in the way that I'd probably like to, and the way that I would naturally have with my birth siblings, especially if we already had that established relationship before we started fostering.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Can I also say another thing?
be careful what you say and when you
Yeah.
say, even in terms of fostering in general, even if it isn't FASD or any type of disability, the way that your home changes. We used to all go and sit on the settee together and all get under a blanket and bring our covers down from upstairs and have like a film night. But you can't do that with siblings. You can't get under the same blanket with them. I know it sounds silly, but from a safeguarding point of view, you can't run around the house in your underwear if you needed to quickly grab something from the other room because you forgot it. You've got to wear your dressing gown. You've got to be so sort of mindful of those sort of things as well. So it isn't just siblings coming into your house, I don't
Yeah.
There are lots of other, obviously, rules and regulations and everything that you have to take into account as well.
Absolutely. No, you're totally right. Oscar, you were going to ask another question.
Yeah, that's another thing. And you were very much close to it there as well. One of the kids that we have, he has no sense of privacy or anything. So, and we've had him since I was 9, so 10 years now. And over those years, I've had to pick and choose who I can have sleepovers with because God knows what this kid's going to do. He could walk into my room butt naked before a shower and just be like looking around my room doing his thing and then leave. But I don't want any of my friends to see that. They don't want to see that. I also can't even, if I'm going out to a park with him, I can't have my friends there because I don't know what he's going to do.
Has he ever embarrassed you publicly in front of your friends? You know, thinking of the different age groups that you are.
Yeah. I think something that being a child who fosters, growing up with a variety of children with different needs, one thing it's really given me is very low social anxiety.
Okay.
I'm not worried if I go out with them, if they make a large noise. So one of them, he likes to scream if something negative happens, if he sees a billboard that has a moving thing and it comes off a screen that he likes, he will scream. That doesn't impact me. I don't get anxious about it happening, and I don't get self-conscious when it happens. So I think that's definitely carried over to many other things as well. I'm a very outgoing, confident person, especially when I'm with my friends. Of course, I try and be considerate, but I can be loud with them. I don't care how they view me because I've grown up with different kids who have done different things in public. And of course, when I was younger, it used to really embarrass me, and I used to get really quite nervous about going out with different children who might do different things. But I think it's definitely, this is what I was coming at earlier as well. It's definitely made me a better person for it because I'm more comfortable in my sense of self.
100%. Sorry, just to butt in there, Andrew and Oscar. But even obviously growing up now and understanding more, I get it because I used to worry about what other people thought, and I used to worry about if they thought, you know, who's she with, or whatever. But now I'm like feeling more protective of them if
Mm.
I'm with them out in public, because I'm like, excuse me, who do you think you are? Like, that's my
So
sister.
do you feel that you've developed more of an empathy
As
being?
I've got older, I do feel like I have, and I do, obviously, now being married and I've got my own 2 children, having that life experience, and just, I work with adults with disabilities as well, so obviously I do have that anyway, but I do think it definitely has made me more empathetic towards it as well, and more understanding.
I'm going to come on to that in a little bit. Cleo, can I ask you, as a younger sibling, did you feel you had a level of empathy towards your brother? Or has there been at times when you've resented your brother?
I think in general I can struggle with empathy sometimes in so many situations, but I feel like once my like parents explain it to me, or like if they like, it's almost like they have to like really like explain it to me, like this is why. For example, my brother doesn't go on family holidays with us. He doesn't like being outside of his like safe zone, which is his room. And I used to be so confused. It'd be like a really hot day and he wouldn't want to go out the house, or we'd be going Spain, whatever, and he wouldn't want to come. And I'd be so confused. And once my parents would sit me down and be like, he doesn't want to go because of such and such, which is due to his FASD, or it's due to this. And like once it was like explained to me, I'd be like, that's not a proper summer. Like no one should have to feel so, so much like they can't leave their comfort zone, that they're missing out on family holidays or a nice day or going out with your mates to the park, like stuff that I grew up doing, just, and I didn't even think about the stuff that he never did. And once it was explained to me, and I'd like, it was so weird, it almost like had to be like dumbed down to me. And once it was, I'd be like, no, I do feel bad now.
Oh, actually, the communication was one of the most important things. I'm going to come on to communication with everybody, if I may, because it's something that when in a lot of our support groups for the parent carers, we talk about how you have to change the way that you parent. You have to have that individual with FASD in the center of your plan. And unfortunately, the impact of that is on the siblings and everybody else around you. And so therefore, you have to come up with a plan that includes everybody in your network, so that everybody, and that's the siblings, and that they all have to understand what the plan is, what the game plan is. Was this something that you feel now has been made clear to you? You mentioned there that your parents dumbed down sometimes because they wanted to make it very clear to you. I'm sure now it would be in a very different, more eloquent explanation if you had any questions about it. Cleo, would you say that that was something that was really important for you?
Definitely. I mean, for me, I needed like, because I'll be honest, I mean, back then I didn't really understand FASD. And even now, I can't say I understand it completely, because I feel like I understand autism, I understand anxiety, but I don't understand all the components that make FASD. To me, some like not so much now, but when I was younger, I just think it was weird. I just think it's just unusual to me back then. So I definitely need the communication from someone that understands what he's got, to come to me to be like, like this is why, because there'd be times when maybe I'm being a little bit rude. Well, actually I was being a little bit rude, or I'm being like, I'm being a bit insulting at times when it needs to be explained to me. No, it's not unusual, it's part of his FASD. So communication for me was vital from my parents to understand it more.
That's interesting. Oscar, you mentioned earlier that, and I picked up that you're quite self-reflective, and you analyze your own reactions and behaviors. Do you think that's
Definitely.
something that has come about from working with lots of different neuro disabilities?
I definitely think being able to talk about my experiences with different children with my parents is such a valuable thing that I've done over the years. That was something that would help me if something confused me, if something, either a situation that happened confused me, or something about a child confused me. I'd bring it up with my parents. So normally if I was going somewhere, so it might be a dog walk with my dad, or it might be just having a chat with my mum while she's cooking dinner, I would just bring it up casually. It would never be we never raised it as like a worry or a concern. It was always just an inquiry, a casual question, because it was all to be educated in it, to be honest, because it is our life, but you don't want to be undereducated in what your life is.
And have you ever felt at risk?
I've always felt safe.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like my parents were there for me. I've always felt like I'm there for my brother. I think there were moments when I would feel anxious if we had a particularly violent child who would outburst when we didn't expect. And I would be on edge with that, but I wouldn't feel at risk. It was always, if we were having, let's say we were looking after a child who would often have violent outbursts, my brother and I, of course, would almost be briefed beforehand, that we'd be given a short background, what we can know, what we know about them, what their behaviors are like. It's then, if I have any questions or if I need any help with how to approach it, I would just ask. It was never, I was never scared of asking in that scenario. And then also,
do you have any pre-planned strategies that you would work through?
I just think when it comes to the different children we've looked after, it's always making them comfortable. And that's always a thought in your mind. It's still, even if the kids that we got now, I'm very comfortable with them. They're brothers to me. They are just brothers. It's hard to say. I don't often call them my foster brothers. I mean, one of them has a special guardianship order with us, but they're still just my brothers. I often have to catch myself and call them my foster brothers so people can actually know the difference between the children themselves.
I'm going to come to Bridie. Bridie, can I ask you, what do you think you've really gained now as an adult with your children?
Yeah.
What do you feel you've gained from fostering? Because, you know, we're all trying to do our best. You know, that's the parents, that's the kids, that's everybody. We're trying to do our best, but it's only with a mature mind and with hindsight, we can look back. But there'll be a lot of people on this call listening today thinking, wow, sounds like you've had a tough time.
I know, that's why I said there were positives.
Well, no, exactly. I'm going to come to the positives because we always like to finish on a positive. So what do you think you really gained from fostering?
Yeah, I think I've gained a really good understanding of other people, and had a lot more quality time with my family that I wouldn't have had. We have had a lot more opportunities sort of given to us or provided for us through the foster agencies and through just having my siblings. And like Oscar was saying, I am calling them my foster brother and sister on this call, but they are my brother and sister. I don't call them my foster brother and sister in real life. But it's just to obviously decipher the difference. I don't really know, to be honest. I just think I've got another brother and sister.
Yeah.
We've had some really good times together. We've got some really good memories. We've had lots of sort of events together. And they're, you know, one of them's moved out, but she's still my sister. I still keep in contact with her. I still love her to bits. She's doing her own thing now, and I've got my other brother. And they're just part of our life. They're just.
And interestingly, both you and your brother and sister, you're all still connected, even in your work now, with complex needs and learning.
Yeah. So I think that has really, really helped. Like I was saying earlier about with the empathy and having that understanding of others and wanting to help others, that not that they need help, but to have those people around them that care and genuinely have their best interests at heart and advocating for them. And I think it's opened up doors that we'd never think of doing. I would never at the moment I'm a carer. I would have never thought that I'd be a carer. I used to work in a bank. So it's a total change for me, but I absolutely love it.
So you've come full circle, really, haven't
Yeah.
you? You left when you were 17. You've gone away. You're independent person. You've got your own family and children. You've worked in a bank, and you've come back to
Yeah,
caring.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and
And
I get it now. I get it, and
yeah,
I looking back and reflecting and writing down the answers to some of these questions and stuff like that. It was hard, like all families are, but my actual brother and sister were hard as well. So
yeah,
is it just that it's your brother and sister? I mean, the meetings and stuff, don't get me wrong, that was quite annoying.
yeah.
But it's just part of being a family and being part of our family. And I love that we've got an extra brother and sister, and I wouldn't want to change that now.
And you're a very close family, aren't you? You're a very close family unit. So this is something that's quite interesting because, you know, despite some of the feelings when you're growing up that, you know, you feel distanced from your parents because all of a sudden or, you know, in Cleo's situation where you've got an individual that can't go on holiday with you because they're outside their comfort zone and you're having to adapt your entire life. And it's not a typical lifestyle. Let's say that it's not that rosy image that everything is
No,
portrayed. And actually you never, in very few family situations, is it that rosy lifestyle. Chloe, I'm going to come to you if I may now, because I really want to ask you, you have a situation where you're now an adult and you view things very differently, just as we were talking about Bridie and Oscar was saying how he has that flexibility now. How do you view your childhood now with your brother with FASD, but not just about your brother's FASD, but how the whole family had to adapt to that?
It's so weird being called an adult. Sorry, it's so weird being called an adult. In my head, I'm like 15 still. For like the whole family, I mean, we did adapt a lot. Like, I know Oscar mentioned something like being careful what you say at the table, and mine was so similar because me and my brother support different football teams, so we wouldn't talk football at the table. And
Yeah.
even now, I suppose me and my brother have different kind of political leanings, so we don't really speak politics at the table. And there are still things like even now that we don't really, we don't really discuss. But like there are so many like nice things about our family. Like I would say we're still quite close, as a family. Like he still does come down from his comfort zone and he'd sit in the main room. And I remember like this is so weird, but I'm at uni now, so I don't see him every day now. But when I was doing my A levels, he'd like always wish me luck and stuff. But he'd say it in like a passive aggressive way. He'd be like, "Good luck," because I want you to go. And I'd
Yeah.
be like, that's his way of saying, I want you to do well. And
Yeah.
it just took me a while to realize that. Or he'd be like, he would sometimes ask, like, he'd ask my dad, like, oh, when's she coming back? Just so I know not to be there. So he'd say it
Right.
like, he'd put a mean twist on it still. So we're not like a close bond or anything. I can't say I text him every day. I don't think he's not really messaged me at all since I've been at uni, I'll be honest. But there were little things he always did to make sure I was okay. When I was growing up, I know I always had it like he was so insulting to me, but in his head it was like he could insult me, but if anyone else insulted me, he'd have an issue. And I always thought that was like one thing that he did as a brother that so many people I felt like had with their siblings. It's like he can call me whatever, but if someone else calls me that, like he's got an issue. And I always thought that was funny. Like he puts his own twist on things, and it's just something I've adapted to and what he does. And I feel like it's like learning his language a little bit.
Absolutely. Now, each of you have a lot of professional sectors coming into your family home, coming into your life. Bridie, you mentioned that the meetings, just even when you're out with your mum on that shopping trip, that one special moment, they've got to take that call, and it's a 2-hour call because it's always complex. If you have the opportunity, I'm going to ask Oscar first, and then I'm going to come to you ladies. If you could tell professional sectors about understanding a little bit more how important siblings are in the family dynamic. What would you say to those professionals?
That's a tough question, but I'd say I think siblings have an awful lot of influence over each other. So me and I'm just going to call them all my brothers. We all have what each of us do will impact each other. I remember when birth brother and I were a bit younger, when we had a break, we didn't like the break from fostering because we felt like it tore us all apart. We wanted that link. So I do think siblings, whether it's a single sibling, whether it's multiple siblings, you feed off each other. You really do. And I think foster sibling, birth sibling, adopted sibling, anything, there is all synergy in that. So I definitely think there is value to understanding that.
And do you feel valued by, in your situation, a foster agency and the professionals that come in? Do you get specialist treatment? Do you get acknowledged even?
On paper, in many ways, yes. There will be, you might have online meetings with other children who foster where you can share your perspectives, share your experiences. But apart from that, if you're someone who's pretty comfortable, so like my brother and I, we're pretty happy in what we do, there's not much acknowledgement anyway. It's
right.
There is, like I said, there's support on paper, but I don't feel like it's something that I can really take. I don't know. It might just be if support was provided in an alternative way, and I can't name that way. I suppose that's the difficulty of it. Then it might be a bit more useful. But at the moment, I filled out a form the other day about it. I can't list what can be done to help.
Okay, I'm going to bring it over to Bridie. You were quite vocal about the impact of agencies coming in and taking up your parents' time. Were you ever properly considered in that?
Right.
Were you ever brought in and asked, "Are you okay?" Were you ever?
Well, there was one time that we had a support worker that came in, or a social worker, I don't even know. It was a lady who was there to help us as the birth siblings, because I think it got to a point where I was obviously, like I've said before, being the voice, arguments were happening. Mum and Dad, I think, felt like we kept telling them how we feel, but there wasn't really anything they could do to change it. So they felt like it would probably be quite good for us to have somebody neutral to speak to that could then feed it back in a way to our parents.
Okay.
So they did, but I think that was initiated by my mum. I think that was through Mum and Dad saying, we think our children need this. That wasn't just something that was automatically obviously there for us as support. We probably went out with her a couple of times. We went bowling, that was exciting. Then we went to Pizza Hut, and that was exciting. But it was quite sad, really, because it was like we were getting excited to go out with a stranger. Like we just want to be with we want to go out with our mum and dad. And I think having that time, if we could talk to the professionals, and I know the job that they have is 24/7 and it doesn't work like that. But I think being able to have the time with your parents in the way you need to, not only when you have respites.
Oh, so you have respite?
We used to have respite every now and again. I think, I can't really remember. I know as they got older we did.
Mm.
But I'm not sure about when they were younger. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But from what I can remember, feeling like if we were going to have a proper conversation between us five or acting a certain way or whatever, it would have to be when we're on respite or going away or whatever. We would go to the yearly barbecue that the company would set up.
Right.
You know, that really helped us. Which was nice, obviously, like Oscar said, meet other people that fostered and stuff like that, but then you never see them again, or you'll see them next year. They're not actually your friends.
So if you were to recommend something to them, what would you recommend for siblings?
the way that they deal with all the meetings and things, the way things are dragged out, and the way that there's so many people involved. I don't know what their communication is like in-house, whether there's obviously like a slicker way of them all communicating to make things happen quicker or be resolved quicker, or I don't know obviously the process because I haven't actually done it myself.
But the point, you know, you were saying that at least to recognize the role of siblings. You know, we've had today all of you from very different walks of life and very different scenarios, all pretty much talking about how the impact, it has had an impact on you and your life growing up. But I think one thing we also have to consider, and I know, Cleo, you were saying this as well, you don't know anything else, do you? This is your life. This is your life. And so the interesting thing for me, I've been fostering for over 20 years now. And in all those years, with all we've had over 20, 30 children through our doors on respite and long-term placements. And we've had a lot of connections with a lot of other foster families. And one of the things that has struck me every single time has been children who foster and the siblings of those with complex needs and learning difficulties always have a level of empathy and care and consideration and are amazing human beings. And I think on that note, we have covered our hour, and I know there's so much we could talk about further. I know Bridie's got a hand up, wanted to talk more. We'll do that next time. We'll have another follow-up because I think this is a subject that is so important. So I'd like to applaud you all and thank you for your honesty and openness here today as well. And I hope that this goes some way to helping a lot of professionals understand the role and the responsibility of that individual that is a sibling within the home, and also to be able to consider what options, what levels of thought should be put to them. And also, if you're a parent that is looking to foster or adopt, having that consideration as well. What impact can this have on those individuals? Listen, thank you all so much. You're all a credit, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on tonight. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time. If you want to, in the meantime, look at any of our webinars, they are all on our YouTube channel or on our website as well, and we look forward to seeing you there. So in the meantime, all the very best. Good night. Thank you.